Hello.
Hello. How are you?
Doing pretty good. How are you
I
doing?
understand, thank God, that we have a small conflict that Cal is also um, streaming on Just Randos right now. So if he sees this, he's welcome to join if anyone wants to tell him. If not, it is what it is.
Yeah, I think he started streaming and then stopped. Um,
All right.
so yeah,
Awesome to be.
love them here as well.
So how was your week, sir?
Was good. As you can see, I'm starting packing.
You started packing. Okay, exciting.
I'm moving, so yeah, this is it's all starting.
It's becoming real.
It is becoming very real.
Okay, but also I think that's a good thing ultimately. No?
It is. Yeah. No, it's nice to have everything. Oh, sorry about that. It's nice to have everything like to start the ball rolling on some of these things, so you can
Yeah,
just get it done. You know. Um,
I hear that. Um, I'm not distracted, but I mean, I don't know if you're following the news right now.
yeah. Yeah, I just spoke to my friend from Israel.
All right, so it's not great,
Yeah.
but hopefully things will work out. So
Maybe
the
we can
next
derive some wisdom from this and see if we can apply
right.
it. Or we can help out.
I mean, that is in a certain sense that's what's said. Um, I was mentioning this in my conversation with Nate on Grail Country. That the reason I got into this, one of the reasons I got into this corner, like other people who saw like Jordan Peterson, is to me as a religious Jew, a lot of the things he was saying that people were very excited about
Mm-hmm.
were things that I learned in my tradition. And it was weird for me that my tradition is not doing a good enough job sort of spreading that out, these ideas out there. And now again, a lot of these lessons and truths and ideas that we learn could definitely benefit a lot of people, most people, definitely leadership. So maybe they'll tune in.
Yeah.
I sent BB an invite.
We'll see what happens.
Um all right. So where were we?
So I think we this was the last one we did, the 15, 15 the Shammai.
15. Shammai, right? We spoke about Shammai. That is true. Right. Okay. So let's move on. 1 second. Okay. Yeah, I like the screen. Yeah, that's nice. Perfect. Rabban Gamliel. Yeah, that's even better. רבן גמליאל היה אומר, עשה לך רב והסתלק מן הספק, ואל תרבה לעשר עומדות. Rabban Gamliel used to say, appoint for thyself a teacher, avoid doubt, and do not make a habit of titithing by guesswork. Oh, like by laser, like taking a tenth of. Okay,
Yeah.
fine. I never used it that way.
Verb. Yeah.
Okay, so let's take it away. Well, I will try to pay attention to the comments, and I also sent a link as well. So Rabban Gamliel, this character, we see a lot of them. There's many Rabban Gamliel around in the Mishnah and the Talmud. This one happens seemingly, traditionally, happens to be Hillel from Beit Hillel, his grandson, famous Hillel. His nickname is, if seeing him according to one of these sources that it is Hillel's grandson, his nickname was Gamliel the Old, because his grandson, Gamliel's grandson, was also named Gamliel. Okay, so that's now we also this is during the time also of the temple, and he really made a move of Gamliel also this is post the Zugot, right? Now we're turning into like individuals again, right now, to individuals.
Yeah.
And he really transformed the title from just, let's say, spiritual leadership to also like social leadership on the ground. And there was decrees he had that had to do with people's marital life and divorce. And he was very involved also with the public sphere. So we have a lunar calendar. So like, when are we blessing the month? He was very involved with these things as well. And he's sort of elevating, in a certain sense, again, this title of Nasi, because he was also one of the Nasi'im. In his name here, we see Rabban Gamliel. So this is when this term Rabban is in Aramaic. Rabbi would be what we would say today, or Rav in Hebrew. But this is really, we could see over here, there's now a title of honor that is being given to the rabbis. So it's no longer, let's say, necessarily, like, there's always a Talmid Chacham, but whether that was like student, or Hillel is famously known as like Hillel. There's a story in the Talmud that a guy wants to test his patience, and he just yells, Hillel, Hillel, are you the one they call Hillel? That's the Nasi. But he only talks to him, calls him Hillel. And here we see an honor title start to be established within the rabbinate and within Israel as well. Here too, we don't have, I don't know if you noticed, we don't have a Kibel Mehem. Right?
Right. It just moves from Shammai and Hillel to Rabban Gamliel.
Right. So this is, in this case, it's because unlike Shammai and Hillel that we said that Kiblu Mehem earlier, here he is still the descendant of Shammai, and within and he's part of the president of the Sanhedrin. So there was a sense that it was all kept sort of inside the family. So for many other Mishnayot, I think really into like mid of the second Perek, up until we get to Rav Yochanan, all of this is sort of within the family, and we're assuming that the tradition was preserved within the family, and all that family also being part of the Sanhedrin and being their presidents. Only later on does that come up.
I see. And does that point to the fact that there is going to be, like, I know there is this term about the shita. Like, is it all it's still kind of like in the school of thought of Shammai and Hillel, and then once it gets to Yochanan, it goes into like there's a new school of thought begins?
Well, really after Yochanan, when we get to Shimon, already in chapter in Mishnah 17, like already during Shimon's time already, you already have post this time, it's already post Shimon and Hillel and Shammai, and we start seeing that there really is people having their own schools of thought. But this also, like you just mentioned, relates to what Gamliel is saying as well. And he tells us, Aselech harav, right? So earlier we mentioned this in Mishnah 6. We already had Yehuda ben Prachia told us, Aselech Rav. Okay, now it's interesting that here their interpretation is Rav is teacher, because really my interpretation, or what I have learned, was that during the time of Shimon ben Prachia, first off, there isn't a lot of, this is before Shimon, Hillel, and Shammai. There aren't so many divisions. So most rabbis are going to be telling you more or less the same thing. Secondly, that is really more about accepting the yoke of Torah and understanding the need to learn Torah. And as part of needing to do so, you need to have a rabbi. Okay, so that's really more of get yourself a general teacher, which they call here a teacher. However, here, Aselech harav is more of, you need to find like the specific rabbi you need, right? You need to create yourself a path. This is a complicated system, and you need to identify the rabbi that's going to be giving you your answers for this system. So this is a lot more specific for, great that you were studying in class and you had a nice teacher teaching you the basics. Now you really need to find yourself and identify for yourself a actual specific rabbi. This also is like I was saying, it's important to stress that once once the time of Hillel Shammai are gone, already during Hillel Shammai, you had a tremendous amount of opinions, but it was still two major schools of thought. At that point, later on, it really, really bifurcates.
Yeah.
There are some that interpret this is to like you need to make yourself your own rabbi, because if you don't, you end up getting to your own conclusions, and that puts you into a space of inconsistency, right? You might decide that today I'm doing X and tomorrow I'm doing Y, and next thing you know, you are contradicting yourself within this system. And in a complicated system like this, having a rabbi also creates stability and consistency, which is also what we would want ideally.
Right. So it seems like there's two things here. So what you pointed out, and correct me if I'm wrong, one thing is that you can create your own thing outside of any kind of, let's say, school of thought within the existing thought that there is. So that would be one problem that you could get into. And then the second thing is that you could have, and I think this is related to the second sentence here, avoid doubt. It almost strikes me as kind of like having this paradox of choice, right? You have so many different rabbis that you can go with, and you don't know what to decide, and then you get doubt, and then you just guess, or you become inconsistent. Those seem to me two issues.
Right. So I think a way to, in one of the interpretations of a Selach Harav, doesn't mean you need to necessarily have the one rabbi for all things. Rather, like you need to identify within the system the rabbis that are giving you their answers for those particulars.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So as in, there are different opinions. So it's not telling you like to, block that out. And one interpretation could be like, put all that aside and focus on one shita or one path that will give you consistency. Others could interpret this as there are many different options. For all of these options, identify rabbis to allow you to move through those different pathways on all those different issues, right? So you could have some issues that have to do with finance, and you could have some issues that have to do with theological issues, and you might have issues that have to do with social issues. So all of them might have a specific rabbi that deals with that issue.
Got it. And so I guess I think I understand what you're saying, but just to maybe like push back a little bit, like how is that not inconsistent? Like if you're just choosing for this thing, I'll do this thing. How is that inconsistent or idiosyncratic?
So I there's on two levels I want to answer what you said, because it's a good question. One is, what if I select rabbis based on what's convenient for me, right? So, okay, I go online and I see like the 10 rabbis in my neighborhood, okay, and then the 10 rabbis in Jerusalem, and then it'll be like, okay, out of those 5 that are in my neighborhood, 6 that are Anglo, and then like I start narrowing it down to be like a very specific thing I'm looking for, then that doesn't work. Okay. Or I know that this rabbi is going to say, yes. Halakha, Jewish law discusses this. So I ask Rabbi 1, who's my general rabbi, and I ask him for a decree with regards to some issue. And then he says, no, I don't like that answer. Right. So I go to Rabbi 2, and Rabbi 2 says, yes. I'm a bit in a pickle then, because in theory, I'm bound now by Rabbi 1. There's like a way out of this, or people will come and say, Rabbi, I have a question. Don't give me your opinion. Give me the opinions out there. So don't make a decision for me. I want to have the options to make that decision, because if you give me your decree, I'm going to be bound by it. So number one, you can't go around like fishing for specific things that you want. Secondly, with your question is, what about the system you're in, right? Which is Rabbi 1 said okay about topic A, and Rabbi 2 said okay about topic B. However, according to Rabbi A, his tools of interpretation, the way Rabbi 2 interprets, like they both interpret things differently and are using terms differently. So how am I consistent within that system?
Yeah.
That would be a place where I would say, and people might disagree with me, where you potentially have more flexibility in Judaism, which is, let's say you have Minhag Sfarad and Minhag Ashkenaz, right? So there's like the Spanish, Sfarad is the actual translation would be Spanish, but let's say the Ashkenazi European Jews and the Sephardic Jews. So I live as an Ashkenazi Jew. Can I, in specific cases, tap into Sephardic Judaism and their halachic decrees as well? Right. Mm-hmm. So that would be an inconsistent system. However, that's happening within like the Sephardic Jew is still part of my minyan, part of my 10 people. And he's still within the same club, so to speak, and within the same system. Now you could be like, well, you don't, that's really just a fail safe and you don't really do that. Okay, sure. But there's still more wiggle room. Mm-hmm. I'll give an example. It's a live example. So, Ashkenazi Jews don't swim on the Sabbath, and there are different reasons. One, he might build a boat. One, he might, when he comes out of the pool, he's going to dry himself off and squeeze the towel, which is something you can't squeeze out water from an element on the Sabbath. And there's just that it's not for the spirit of the Sabbath. And you might, to go to the pool, you might, the beach itself or this body of water might be outside the bounds of the city of Shabbat, which you can't be walking. So many different issues. However, according to the Sfaradim, the Sephardic Jews, there is an exemption to do so. What is this exemption? This exemption is if it's not your everyday pool, if it is clearly a pool and not a body of water, and if it's extremely hot outside, where like it makes sense that you're in the pool to cool yourself off and not because it's like a pool party. Okay. Mm-hmm. So my in-laws, I built them a house up north, and that house has a pool in it, and it is in one of the hottest places in Israel. So when I'm there on the Sabbath, I swim. My sons know that we're not using towels. We're going to air dry. They know that we don't have music playing like we do during the week if we're there. We don't have any rubber boats or things like that inside the water because it's not like pool fun. Mm-hmm. It's water, swimming. Yeah, we could laugh and things like that, but it's just more swimming and more chill. Now, I have siblings that won't do that, right? They can't see themselves making that jump and taking on this Sephardic tradition because to them it's too much out of bounds as far as they're concerned. Now, right. I pointed out to a sibling of mine while I was having this discussion with her that you're not going to do this. However, as we speak, you are folding the sheets of the bed you were sleeping on. She came over for Shabbat. I'm like, you're folding this on the Sabbath. That means you're preparing for after Sabbath, and you can't do that on the Sabbath. You can't prepare for after Sabbath. As in, you're not doing the dishes for after Sabbath. You're not starting to clean up the house for after Sabbath. So my sister says, you're right. We all pick and choose where we find ourselves needing to sort of play around. Now, no rabbi is going to come and tell you need to pick and choose. However, on the ground, I am more comfortable doing that. Mm-hmm. But that would be, I guess, like a live example where you could see something like that, happening.
Right. The flexibility within the system.
And when I asked a rabbi about this, so I could see the uncomfort in a certain sense of being like, yeah, you can. I was like, right. I'm like, now how much of that is just because of, it's not for Shabbos. I'm like, right. But I'm like, what about the condition I'm in? And he's like, okay, yeah. So, you know the answer. The answer is yes, you could. So He's never going to come and say, this is the answer I gave Chezi. Or this is like a decree that I'm doing right now.
Right. It reminds me of like, I heard about this halacha. This is way more dramatic, but there's something about if an enemy is surrounding your city, and they say, okay, we'll take one individual from the city and we will kill that individual, and then the whole city will be liberated. You cannot release that person, even though it's going to, we assume it will save the entire city. You can't just give them any random person for many reasons. And there's another related halacha, is that the enemy is asking for a specific person, I think, and then there is something about you might be able to allow that person, or I don't know if it's allow or make them or bring them to the enemy. But if you ask the rabbi, he's not supposed to tell you, yes, you should do this. Even though you're allowed to do it, the rabbi should like wrestle with himself and with you and tell you, and if he does tell you yes unequivocally, then he's also going to be judged, even though it is the right thing to do according to halacha.
This relates to Rabbanim. Hizaru b'divrachem, right? We have to be very careful with how you're going to be understood and how you're going to be perceived. We should never be tested with those questions, of course. All right, moving on.
Yeah, I think so. I don't know if Andrew is saying that he will gladly give a random person. I think one thing that I heard, Chezi probably knows about this more, but I think one reason that I heard is that random won't necessarily be random. You might say, well, we have all our tzaddikim in the city. Why wouldn't we won't give the tzaddikim, right? We won't give all our...
Are you selecting one over the other? Correct.
Yeah. So randomness is a tough... It's assuming that you're actually not going to be that random when you actually pick the person.
Well, we know now to not sit next to. I guess I wouldn't be random for Andrew, right? So I'm safe. You and I are safe.
During a siege. Yeah.
I'm just saying, Andrew is the mayor. We know what's going down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's going to be weird. We're like, Andrew, but no one asked for you to send out people. No, it's okay. It's fine. Send them out. Okay. So
maybe we'll say, send us your tallest person.
Oh, there you go. Rabban Gamliel used to say, a point for thyself a teacher, right? So we just explained, and I think over here the translation should be like really a rabbi, not teacher. I think earlier on it should have been teacher. Avoid doubt. So what does that mean to avoid doubt? So one is, it's very clear. Remove doubt. You should act very precisely. Okay. And one way obviously is achieving this is by getting a rabbi, right? So getting the rabbi allows you to remove that doubt, allows you to act precisely, allows you to build the system, right? These are two lines that are connected to themselves, obviously. Yep. There's some people interpret this as this should be like when it says avoid doubt is specifically talking to a dayan, a judge, part of a system, the legal system in the Sanhedrin or in Judaism, and they will judge you. Now we're saying don't do this alone, do this as part of a group so you could avoid doubt. You should be discussing this thing amongst other people so you could avoid this issue. Just in general, doubt in Judaism is something that's, we're telling you to avoid this doubt, but doubt is in a certain way like embraced. Like the Kuzari talks about how someone needs to go through all levels of doubt to find God, right? Like that's part of like the process you need to actually go through. Rabbi Cook, which I'm very fond of and mentioned often over here, he really thinks that like a smart man, he's like, if you're a child or a simpleton and you have a very a pure emunat tamimah, calls like this pure faith, this child's faith, that's fine. If you are an intelligent person though, and in all areas of your life, you're like, you're seeking, you're looking, you're understanding. But when it comes to like your religion, you're like, I do this because this is what they told me and that's it. That is, Rabbi Cook sees this as a problem. There is the expectation that you challenge yourself, even if that means going through these levels of doubt, or these levels of heresy, really. You have to go, if the Kuzari mentions you have to go through all these levels of kfirah, of heresy, where you, of apikorsut or kfirah? I can't remember if it's either way, it's the same. But you should go through all these levels. So Rav Kook also, the wise man should challenge himself, even if it makes him uncomfortable. That's really talking about like more of, let's say, theological doubt than, let's say, halachic doubt, right? It's not an invitation for you to live like a wayward life because you have a hall pass now, basically. It's but doubt itself, even, I would say that in Judaism, we really start from this place of certainty into doubt and back into a higher level of certainty, where you have this lower level of certainty where you could even find in idol worship, right? Looking at the stars, seeing that there's a greater, worshiping some sort of power. Then there's this enlightenment stage, so much so that the Greeks even forgot that they used to worship gods. Like the philosophers turned into this thing, basically, that they realized like there was once this other version that we were enchanted with, all the way back to getting, like you could say even now with like the Vervaeke conversation or the Jordan Peterson conversation, like getting re-enchanted, but at a higher level than where the idol worships were. As Jews, we would say like, transcending to like monotheism and one God, and understanding like, the unification of those things is a much more mature understanding of that certainty. So right. I would say you have sort of that, like, and we mentioned them also last time, but like Descartes, right? He had like, I think, therefore I am. And he wants to, like, confirm that he exists. And if he exists, then God exists. And if God exists, like the world exists. But ultimately then philosophers from Descartes after are trying to basically disprove his certainty. And his certainty, with Descartes, you have like the reverse. It's doubt, right? Like you have to doubt everything, to certainty. But I think philosophy then brings us back to this doubt, to this uncertainty that we're not sure. Postmodernism takes us to a place where, what do words even mean? Am I even thinking? Can I even use these terms thinking?
Right. Hermeneutics of suspicion.
That's right. So I think Judaism is like the reverse of that, where it's lower level of certainty, doubt, higher level of certainty.
Yeah. So I have something that's confused. I need to find out where I heard this commentary or where I saw it, but there was some commentary that is confusing me a little bit. Sure. Maybe you can help me out with it. That it compared or analogized Amalek and doubt, right? So
of course,
there is a sense of how doubt, and I think maybe it says safek, of how terrible that can be. But on the other hand, we were just talking about, and I get what you're saying about how doubt is important for the sake of questioning, of like ladat, to actually know more and more about God and about the world. So how do you separate questioning and doubt, or like how is this like connected, and this idea of how it's connected to Amalek?
So the way I've heard this idea is that Amalek is the internal doubt. Okay? And you're going out and telling yourself, and we discussed this in previous Mishnahs, Imena Nili Mili, right? Like doubting yourself, or like, turning yourself into the nothing. Right. Or let's say, we're discussing that some ideas that we have in the East of, completely, that full ego death into like nothingness, and the spirit can move on.
Yeah.
Amalek is the one necessarily challenging you. Well, let's say at least theoretical Amalek, right? There was a concept of people called Amalek, which were the ones that would prey on the weak and on the poor in the desert, right? People that were not sure if they're going to make it or not, they were destroyed by Amalek. And when the Israelites go out, again, Amalek attacks them. And this is for them to doubt themselves. Like, are we those poor people that made it out? Are we one of those straggling people in the back that are going to get destroyed by Amalek? And that doubt from there, which we required, God tells Moses, when you put your hands up to the sky, right? I'm not going to make a miracle happen. When you put the hands up to the sky and they look at you, if they believe in themselves enough, they will overcome. They will overcome this. And here, in today's day and age, what does that mean? We still have to destroy Amalek. We need to destroy the self-doubt in ourselves that's telling us, you can't do this. You're not good enough to do this. And you see at a wedding, you see people, the couple's getting married and you see people standing in the crowd looking, that couple, it's not going to last. It's going to last 6 months, no more. That's like shooting arrows of doubt towards those people and towards that, and that's doubt within the person you're selling that to. So that is the Amalek doubt that you're trying to get rid of. It's less the doubt of, should I challenge myself, and more the doubt of, who do you even think you are that you have a chance to do this? Who do you think that you could follow through, that you could pull this off? And going back to Anili Mili, Modani, right? I think and I recognize I am exist, and the Creator made me. And so because he made me, who am I to doubt myself in that sense? You're like, that's a nice little Dvar Torah, Chezi.
It is. It's good. It's good. I'm trying. I feel like I don't know if what you were saying is like, in my mind, is it the way that you doubt? Because could you say, like, even if for that couple, let's say, well, maybe not on their wedding day, but maybe there is a sense of how you can doubt and say, oh, you can doubt it. Like, who are you to be so happy with yourselves? And so that would be one kind of doubt. But maybe, is there a doubt a legitimate doubt where you can tell your friend, like, how sure are you about your relationship with this person that you're going to spend the rest of your life? Right. So
yeah, is it coming with a hug, or is it coming with arrows?
Right. So it's the way you do it. So it is the way you do it, the way you approach it, and the openness of the question or of the doubt. I don't know how to put it.
For sure. Rabbi Cook again says that there's a lot in common between the start. Like, there's a lot more in common between Sam Harris and the rabbi than, like, just some random guy, because they both are dealing with doubt. They're both trying to figure out and massage their way through. So it definitely has to do with what the intention is and how you're going about it.
Right.
What Rihal is saying is, you undoubtedly will go through levels of doubt with regards to, like, heresy, of challenging the things you understand and believe, because you are trying to ultimately get to some sort of truth. Then there's doubt, which is not doubting. Here you're doubting not because to get to the truth, it's because you're doubting that, that doubt is already asserting the truth. Don't even think that you could do it, because you can't do it.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And it's not like, man, I really hope this time it works out for him. Like, his few marriages did not work out. Like, I really hope this works out. And you could be, like, doubtful because of that. And mentioning that means, like, the stats don't look good for this guy. And there's a difference between that and, like, you see this is going to fail. Then that's you're saying that's what's going to happen. And you're sending that doubt. Now, obviously, if someone challenged you, you'd be like, I can't be certain. Of course, I hope it works out well for him. But you're sending these Amalek arrows to him. We have a comment over here from the Clown of Babylon. Sam Harris is more of a clown than me. He is a clown. But I don't know. His heart's in the right place, I believe. One day he'll come around. His name will be Shmuel Haris, and he'll be a great rabbi. I don't know if my answer removed doubts from you. But,
no, it's good. It's good. I like how you put it. So I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Okay, and we could end this Mishnah with where were we? Right? We said about tithaning, giving like a tenth of by guesswork. Don't do this. So what is this? What are they even talking about? This is in Jewish law, we have that you give a tenth of your crops, for example, or these goods that you grow. You give a tenth, and there's some that go to the priest, and some that go to the Levi, and some to go to the poor. And one has to be very, very exact about these measurements. This is what the Torah, the Jewish law demands and dictates. However, if you are stuck with no measuring tools to do so, then you are going to take an estimate. And the Torah is telling you, well, the Mishnah is telling us over here, do not make this a habit of making estimates. Not in, and this is just used as a general idea of taking this tenth. But in general, when doing anything in Jewish halacha, don't try to estimate and guess and try to best understand how this is. Specifically about this, there is already a halacha about that you're not allowed to do this at all. So it's strange that they say don't make a habit of it, because you're not allowed to do it at all. And some interpret that it's not talking about this specific halacha of Maasrot, rather it's talking about Trumot, which is like something that you're giving on, you don't have to give, but you want to give. And in that case, you shouldn't be doing this. But that's just like more of like more of like a technical term.
Right. So guesswork shouldn't be your default way of how you apply halacha.
Yes, and then I'm trying to be burnt over here that he only gives the Maaser to Levites that wash the Kohen's hands, which I famously do not. I'll give a response about that at a later time. I know that Jacob has, heart palpitations because of this. However, I claim that this is not, there's no true source to this. Even though I understand that it's become culturally accustomed, you could be like that. There's, that's its own minhag. But I'm pushing back against that. However, in my synagogue, I have yet to get an aliyah to the Torah on a Levi, and they know I am one because I have, it says on the back of my prayer shawl, it says Levite. The reason I believe this is true is because the guy that's running the synagogue, it's him and his sons. He's like a big character there, and he is a Kohen, a priest. And he must know that I'm never there washing his hands. So I'm thinking maybe there's some of that going on over there. But yeah, anyway, see, we have her Lynn. I've been LARPing. Just want to say hello. Very interesting, Lynn. I hope all's well. We're happy to have you over here. All right, let's keep going. Yeah. So I was basically, if anyone is thinking of taking on my tradition or my new tradition of not washing the hands, know that you might be boycotted from being called up for the Torah. Okay. We are now at
17.
Okay, 17. Mishnah 17. Shimon beno Omer. Kol yamai gadalti ben hachachamim, ולא מצאתי לגוף טוב אלא השתיקה, ולא המדרש הוא העיקר אלא המעשה. וכל המרבה דברים מביא לחטא, או מביא חטא, not מביא לחטא, מביא חטא. And in English, the translation would be, Shimon, his son, used to say, all my days I grew up among the sages, and I have found nothing better for a person than silence. Study is not the most important thing, but actions. Whoever indulges in too many words brings about sin. Okay, this all seems very relevant to everyday life in general. So let's start with some background over here. Shimon is Bno, the son who just said earlier, Rabbi Gamliel. And Shimon is, this is right after the revolt of Bar Kokhba, I believe. Is this right after the revolt of Bar Kokhba? I think so. Yes, this is after the revolt of Bar Kokhba, and this is also he ends up getting killed as one of the first of the 10 martyrs. Okay, there's like a lot of new decrees on the Jews at this time, and it was a very, very difficult time during Shimon's time. He was known for a specific decree of his because he didn't have many, and unfortunately he gets killed. But for the unholy, someone that becomes unholy, becomes a tamed, becomes unclean, touches a dead body or other things that happen, he must bring a sacrifice to the temple. However, sacrifices, lambs, the animals that you would bring were quite expensive. And his decree was that if there's a few unclean, unholy, tameh people, they could bring one sacrifice aggregate together. Or not aggregate, like combined. They could all buy one. And this still counts for them. And this was obviously, like, from a monetary perspective and like a social perspective, very, very good to the people, because this allowed them to save on the tremendous costs.
Mm-hmm.
buying these lambs at the time. So what did he tell us? Kol yamai gadalti ben chachamim velo matzati laguf tov el shtika. All my days I grew up among the sages, and I've found nothing better for a person than silence. So what does that mean that he grew up among the sages? So he is growing up in a house full of wise men. He's involved with these wise sages all the time. And he's saying, when I'm looking around after all these years, I'm seeing that the best move is to really keep your mouth quiet, keep your mouth shut, be silent. Some people say that he grew up between the sages, he's growing up after Shimon, and he's growing up in the time of Hillel and Shammai. So he's growing between these two different schools of thought. So there's a lot of different ideas out there. And he's saying, in order to really learn, once there's a lot of different ideas out there, you must be silent, because there's a time for you just to be listening and hearing and understanding what people are saying, because there's a lot of information out there. There's a lot of a noise, and you want to hear the signal. And if you're going to be talking, you're going to end up missing that signal, which obviously dovetails very nicely with his next comment, which is velo matzati laguf. I'm saying, sorry, velo matzati laguf el shtika is. Wait a second. I want to read this again. Velo matzati laguf tov el shtika, and then right. There's this concept. It's like it's fleeting for me right now. This idea. It was like a very interesting idea. This dichotomy they have, but it's slipping away from me, so I'm not remembering right now. Hopefully, it will come back to me.
So one question that I have about found nothing better for a person than silence. So in Hebrew it says guf, which is body. It can be you can say it as body. Why would he use that specific word?
Why would he use that? Okay. So actually, you just reminded me. So Rabbi Cook actually he takes this word body and he's saying it as like, your actual body, which is that yes, it's good to be silent. However, constantly being silent is bad for your body. As in here we're saying, velo matzati laguf tov el shtika. And Rabbi Cook flips it on his head and says that the shtika is lo tov laguf, right? The silence is not good for the body if it's in an extreme, as in there's a time and place to be silent when you're the student, when you're listening. However, at some point, if you keep that all bottled up inside, that is going to be damaging to your body. You're not going to be able to continue. It won't be productive to you. It's also important to say that when he says velo matzati laguf tov el shtika, silent. And it's happening within the context of him saying that I grew up in a house full of sages. He's telling you that even the words of wisdom, it's better that you're quiet about them. So obviously you could be like, I'm talking about nonsense. I'm talking about binging. You should keep your mouth shut. But even if you have things that seemingly are wise to say, you should be quiet. And from what we learned in previous Mishnayot, we see that, and if not for the reason that it could be misconstrued, you could be misunderstood. So even wise words could end up causing a lot of devastation. So, we see that here, again, there's also a general hint of what's happening around him at the time. There's so many ideas being thrown out there. There's a lot of divisions. He's saying a lot of us should just really be keeping our mouth shut and trying to really hear that signal.
Right.
Okay. V'lo midrashu ha'ikar ela ma'aseh. Study is not the most important thing, but actions, right? So at the end of the day, it's all about actions, right? It's not whether you walk the walk, but he talks the talk, but does he walk the walk? And here too, we're talking about, at the end of the day, you have all these wide ideas. We have all this thinky talking in this even in this little corner. But like what Grimm talks about, embodiment, and obviously other people talk about embodiment, but that's really what it is in the end of the day. Are you going to show up on the Chino Camp Yard grounds and are you going to pitch the tent for someone else? Are you going to build? Are you going to do? Are you going to quote unquote, put your money where your mouth is? And for that, you need silence, right? You don't need to be talking to be doing those actions. That's really, and they're really letting you know, and they're saying that lo hamidrash hu ha'ikar. This is obviously a very big question with regards to, is it in Jewish tradition, is it learning, the study of Torah that counts, like we've discussed before, or is it the action that counts, right? Is it and this is a very big question within debated within the Talmud, which ultimately the conclusion is gadol Talmud she'mavih li'yedei maaseh, right? So I'm saying learning is important because it brings to action. So yes, you must learn. There's a time and place to learn, so you know what to do, but ultimately you must do. This also relates to what's happening in the country again, right? With regards to the ultra orthodox over here. So how much emphasis do we put on the learning, and how much emphasis do we put on telling my lovely brothers, well, your learning is fantastic and I want it to be ongoing forever and eternity. And I want to be part of that ongoing chain of learning. What you are learning is to manifest and act and embody out in the world, in the communities, in the population, and make its way across the globe to other people. So one must act, and I think here in this Mishnah we see another place. Even though earlier we were saying how important it is to learn, ultimately there's a lot about action and embodiment, which again is embodying the Torah, manifesting the Torah, not only by the study of it, but also the actions themselves. So we see this being stressed here as well. And it wraps up with the kol hamarbe dvarim mavi chet. Whoever indulges in too many words brings about sin. Right. So this is a classic Jordan Peterson about not lying, or at least try to tell the truth. Right. Like, got to be careful with your words. Words being used the wrong way. I always used to give like people like an example how quickly things could like go off just by little interactions of people talking too much. And I would use this as dating when I was younger, talking to younger guys. You're going to go tell you like Becky. So you're going to go speak to Jess about Becky. And you're going to go tell Jess, hey, Jess, I like Becky. And now Jess goes and talks to her friend. She's like, oh, my God, I was just talking to Chezi. He's like obsessed with Becky. I'm not obsessed with her. I just said I liked her. Okay. Then one of her friends sees me walking outside near, I don't know, someplace. And they're like, you're Chezi, right? Oh my God, I heard like you're obsessed with Becky. Oh, actually, we were just talking to her. What, are you a stalker? How did this turn into like now me being a stalker just because like saying I like this person, and like, people suddenly using these words or these terms or talking too much about a topic always leads to problems. And sometimes relating to the thinky talky, you could talk a lot and have no answers and just end up wasting someone's time. So I joke about this with my grandfather, may he live and be well, and I love him very much. But the joke in the family is like, you'll go to grandpa or Saba and you'll tell him, Saba, what time is it? First of all, what is time? And who are we? You're like, okay, like this is not going to be productive if like we do this on every single word. We're just going to like unpack and like, there's no end to these kind of things. There's even a hint over here. Some sages see this as a hint all the way back to Eve, right? She added to what Adam said, and you added more words over here, and that led to to people misunderstanding, which led to the first sin. Basically, you brought about the first sin was brought upon by using too many words, by not being precise and I think there's like obviously a very deep lesson over there as well, which is like how quickly you could fall from grace just by not being precise. There's a phrase le'olam yeshne adam letamidav derech ktsara, which Maimonides likes, which is you got to speak clear, succinct, short. Don't take the long route, but rather just give people the information. This is this maybe we went overboard with how legacy media today has like 30-second sound bites, right? Maybe we made it like a little too small. But the question is, if we need to answer a question about taxes, doesn't need to be like a a 50-hour series, right? The meaning crisis doesn't need to be 50 hours, or could we be doing this in like a 10-hour conversation, a 5-hour conversation?
Right. Yeah. I think Viveki will say would talk about how relevance realization can help you understand the trade-off between how much information you want to give, right? Like being concise versus when do you need to be a little bit more detailed. Um, for any particular, I mean, I can definitely see that with any interaction that I have with certain people. I can be more detailed, right, about specific topics, and certain people you just need to give them like a specific opinion, perspective, and then from there maybe you can, if needed, you go into more detail.
You
But
could
yeah,
elaborate more, correct.
a very important skill, and yeah, I see this echo like in a lot of the chapters that we're going through, the Mishnah that we're going through. Concise, precise. Yeah.
Which I think, by the way, is again as beautiful as, you know, because this is all downstream. Downstream sounds like at a lower point, but I just feel like this is all part the oral Torah, which this is, even though ironically it's written down, but the oral Torah goes alongside the written Torah, being the 5 books, because while it could seem like a sweeping decree by God saying, you know, all need to do X, once it comes down to the details, you see the rabbis being like, how are we going to do it? Who's going to do it? When are we going to do it? Like, we get a lot more personal, a lot more embodied, a lot more specific, which I think shows a lot of understanding of, you know, sort of the human condition with regards to it's dealing with the divine Torah. Mm-hmm. And almost sort of, and to say that it's clearly, this is part of what God wants. He clearly understands that, like, obviously this is how it would manifest, right? Where we would need to be patient with the poor, and we would have to explain someone that's not understanding it well. We'd have to be very patient with them and explain it to them a certain way. So I think there is a lot of sensitivity to that here. All right. Next Mishnah, and I think it's actually the last Mishnah of Pirkei Avot.
Is the last Mishnah?
Is that correct? Want to scroll down?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
I think Dan has a question. We can probably answer it.
Okay. So this passage is teaching about this. Is teaching about study versus working. Sorry, this passage is teaching about study versus working a job. That the most important thing is working a job and not the study. Yes. But again, to clarify, Dan, the study is necessary, right? Like, even to read these words that we're teaching right now, study is necessary. This is only happening like in the study hall, basically, where I could read these things and understand these things. So this is all part of making yourself a rabbi that we're saying. Right? So you're already a part of a system. So there's going to be the years where you're learning to study. But ultimately, because we have passages that discuss the importance and stress the need and the commandment to the actual physical act of studying, it's necessary for the rabbis to always have a caveat, which is right, but it ultimately has to manifest in embodiment. It has to manifest in action. So yes, it's more important, but like I mentioned earlier, there's a concept which is in Hebrew, which is it's the conclusion is the learning is great because it leads to action. Like it's not that we prefer learning, whether we stress learning, because learning ultimately will lead you to action. The question is, when do you cut the cord? Right? When are you going to be like, okay, it's time to leave the cave. It's time to leave the home, or like God tells Abraham, go for yourself, go out there, get out there and actually start embodying, start doing.
Well, you do that. Yeah. I mean, I would almost think that you do that every day, almost every second, in a sense, right? Because I mean, you give an example. You were just talked about like helping the poor, for example. You can study about how to help the poor and like the stories surrounding that, but that is something that you can do every day. It's like, or at least a small amount of it, right? So you can keep practicing and practicing and practicing and learning more about it, and then practicing and more learning, going back and forth, which is more dynamic than, you don't necessarily need to do like all the learning and then okay, now I'm going to do all the doing. It's probably this more dynamic approach.
So when my brother, my oldest brother, and my older cousin were being drafted, so we had this family get together, to sort of see them off. And my uncle spoke, and my uncle said how in the community, right, that's being drafted or going to the army as part of a religious community is, which we see in the ultra Orthodox community, is not really done, right? They're against this because of they're saying you're missing out on the study of Torah. Mm-hmm. However, my uncle was mentioning then, aside from, let's say, the classics of, let's say, protecting Israel is like you're saving someone's life, and this is very important. He was mentioning how this is, you get the opportunity to live Torah. He's like, while you're going to be walking during your on your checkpoints, or you're doing your patrol, you could be going over your heads right now on, and this is happening during the Sabbath, which does during the army, go over in your head the laws of these bounds of Shabbat, and go over the study of, like, is this fence tall enough or not to be classified or characterized as something that would be permissible or not to pass over. And when you are dealing with your soldiers and in such an interaction, when can you put on your halacha glasses and see where can I apply halacha over here? Or using, let's say, a matrix idea at the end of Matrix, right? Neo realizes he finally sees the matrix, right? He sees the code going through. So can you look at the world in that way? Can you look at the world where, this is another thing my uncle would say, he would, when he was in the kitchen and my aunt would offer him some food on Friday, he's like, I can't eat that food that you're cooking because that has the Sabbath particles inside. Like, he is already looking at that as his code, right? Not as like, oh, it's chicken. It's like, no, that's Shabbos chicken that has Shabbos code on it, which is not relevant for me right now. Because that's, so in that case, I would say, like I was saying earlier, where it's more dynamic, that is living the Torah and doing so. So the question is, when you're doing that, then you're sort of acting out Torah. It would only qualify as the study of Torah if, let's say, and that's why, at least what I tell myself, when we have these discussions, this one for sure, because we're literally learning Torah, but even on a just chatting, there's a lot of that which I believe is the learning of Torah. It doesn't matter to me whether or not the guy I'm speaking to knows that his ideas also show up as Maimonides' ideas or Maimonides' ideas. As far as we're concerned, we're just discussing ideas, but that is the learning of Torah as well.
Yeah.
There's another comment over here if it's relevant. Chezi, if you're being boycotted for not washing the Kohen's hand, you should start washing the Kohen's hands. I don't know if I'm being boycotted. I think that's the theory. I did consider that. I also considered that because it's difficult for me to answer my son why we don't do that right now without sounding like either very arrogant or very dismissive. Yeah, I got to still think about that. But I appreciate your point. Okay. Hala.
Allah.
Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel Omer. We have another Gamliel, Ben Gamliel, right? This is like his grandson now. Al shlosha dvarim ha'olam omed. Al adin, ve'al ha'emet, ve'al ha'shalom, shene'emar emet u'mishpat shalom b'sha'arechem. Okay, now this is interesting. In here, in Sfaria, it says Al shlosha dvarim ha'olam omed. However, in most versions, it says Al shlosha dvarim ha'olam kayam. And ha'omed is what we see in. Let me see if this is true for a second. 1 minute.
Yeah. When I look at the Chabad,
Al shlosha dvarim ha'olam kayam. Even though I'm aware that there are other sources that write it like this as well, but generally speaking, it's ha'olam kayam. And so it exists, and it doesn't necessarily it doesn't stand. On Mishnah Bet, it's where the world stands on those three pillars, and here it exists on these three concepts, basically. So this is the interpretations are in Mishnah Bet. It's talking about what the whole world stands on, right? The existence stands on, and this is talking about what society rests on, right? These are different levels of the way how we're looking at this. Basically, one is talking about like a high level of existence. One's talking about really is from a society level. There's another reason to be looking at it this way: difference between originally standing and now kayam and like existing, which is the first time in the first Mishnah Bet. This is during the temple. So while we still need to be told these things, we're in a much higher level spiritually, and we could be connecting to these major pillars. However, post temple, we no longer have that. We don't have that access anymore to the divine. So we're at a lower level, basically, of like existence at that point. And he tells us, we didn't even read this one in English. Sorry. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel used to say, so we're going to continue right now. On three things does the world stand or exist, according to some interpretations: on justice, on truth, and on peace. As it is said, execute the judgment of truth and peace in your gates. Zechariah. The interpretation also over here of this verse is emet, which we just see as truth. Mishpat, they have judgment over here. In here they have judgment and justice, which sound more similar in English. In Hebrew, mishpat and din are not really the same thing. And mishpat in this case, umishpat, is connected to the word shalom. However, the sages interpret this as three separate things: emet and mishpat and shalom, and they interpret mishpat as din. That's how they do this this move over here. So what are these things? What do we have that is din, emet, and din, emet, vel shalom? What is this peace, justice, and truth that we have? So din is really is the cutting, okay? Is making the decisions. Ultimately, at some point, you need to make a decision. And this is a downgrade if we're using the example, the parallel of like we used to have the temple, now we don't. We used to have the Torah. We don't have the Torah anymore in its sense of coming from, let's say, the temple. Now we have din. We have this specific thing that we need to figure out. We have shalom, peace, which is really talking about sort of a harmony between things, a balance which allows two things to coexist at the same time. This is during the temple, we had the korbanot, we had the sacrifices, which allowed us to create peace between us and heaven. Okay, we no longer have this anymore. So now we have the term shalom. There's different interpretations of this, obviously. I'm going to give like a few that I recall. We have emet, which is truth, which is complicated at times. Like truth doesn't mean you're necessarily going to find a balance. Truth sometimes means like you have to accept like a hard truth that doesn't give you that harmony that peace necessarily gives you. And this is sort of an answer back to Gmilut Chasadim. Gmilut Chasadim and being righteous and helpful to the needy allows you in a certain way. That is a real act of truth that allows you to pierce through these things. And it's there's no self-interest over here, and you're really acting and helping the others. It's easy to see the truth in that. However, once the temple goes, we no longer have that access to that abundance of us being able to act in that level of kindness to one another, and that's why we need to emphasize the concept of truth. Again, there's different interpretations that see that din leads to emet, which ultimately leads to shalom, right? So if I eventually make a decision, that will lead me to get to the truth. And if once I get to the truth, then I could finally have peace, right? So you need those three elements to that follow suit. And there's interpretation, which is like din is for the people. There's a nation. I can't be dealing with the truth right now. I need to create a system, and the system is going to be faulty, but it's it's a system truth. It's a system deen that I need to get to. It could be it's right. It could be it's wrong. At the end of the day, I need to make a decision right now to allow us to move forward in society. There's the truth that is for the individual. That's already more in the middle right now, where I need to find the real truth for myself to know if I'm right or wrong. Shalom is for God. Shalom already comes from the outside and allows us to like really wrap that all in one understanding, where the truth could actually manifest all the way through the deen. Where I could have that balance of both of them being true. Yeah, you could.
Yeah, that was. It's a lot to think about.
This one's short and concise, but it's also there's a lot there. I mean, like, to be honest with you, there could be like, a whole conversation about like what does emet mean, what does truth mean, what does justice mean. It's again, the deen specifically. This is also sort of the rise, in a certain sense, the rise of Islam post the destruction of the temple, is also which sees itself Islam which is interpreted as deen. There's a lot there as well, which is like we have a system now that has to be very rigid, very, very rigid, basically. And like I was saying earlier, either it's because it's for the people, because it's very hard for us to have godly truth with us today, as far as like the whole population, can we contain that? Or we need deen as a tool to slowly but surely make our way towards some sort of truth, and then once we receive that truth, bask in that peace. But like you said, it's we're just scratching the surface really here. But go ahead.
And no, it's interesting. I like to think about the dynamic about these three. And I think one of the things that you mentioned about how, I think you said something about how deen can be something that is more about the social, the social kind of like that society needs to make a certain decision about how this is how it goes, and emet, the truth, something that's more individual, and then shalom is like, I think you said it's between kind of like the relationship with God. Almost got me to think about also about like, you can think about it even psychologically, right? With like where you have like the social aspect, and how you need to marry that with your own truth, and how that can be done through maybe shalom, right? Through kind of like how things can live together, both the social justice that is putting pressure on you, and also the truth that you have individually in a certain way. I don't know what will be a good way to articulate that, and how shalom kind of is both maybe the end result, but also the process of how you're bringing these things together into a whole, right? Shalom.
Right. So this relates to something we mentioned last week, which is shlemut v'hishtalmut, right? Completion and the process of completing, basically. Okay, like moving towards completion. And one is, completion is fixed. There's no movement over there, while moving towards completion is alive. Is alive. There's movement there, and you really require both. However, because seemingly those don't always go together, even though, like, in quantum mechanics we have like the superposition, and you have these both could be here and not here at the same time, only when it's observed, right? So I would say that the deen would be one place, and the shalom would be in another place. The emet is, well, there's different. Again, you could interpret this in different ways, but emet in a certain way is just emet, is just truth, and a higher level of that is shalom, which is truth that allows you still to allow the other to be there as well. Because just truth, which I said earlier, was complicated, because just truth means like maybe there's no room to compromise. Because compromise.
Right. Yeah, I was talking. I can't remember. I was talking to my wife about this. I can't remember the example, but how the contextualizing the truth, or even if something seems like true, like this is the thing that you need to, like the decision that you need to make. Like you need to do that in a way that actually brings people together. And you can keep talking about, I guess, the Israeli.
That would be shalom, though.
Right. Right. I mean, like, let's say there's something that one side, let's say the coalition thinks like, this is what we need to do. This is obviously needed. Is this right? This is the emet. Is this the way to actually to do it? Like, how do you bring shalom into it? Right. Yeah.
Right. So obviously very apropos for what's going on in Israel, right? So like
Mm-hmm.
the dean would be, yes, legally you are the majority and you won, and you should be changing. You have the right, the legal system, to make this. The emet is both parties know that there needs to be a reform in the judiciary system. And both parties, many of them, even the opposition, have said things that are very close to what the coalition wants to do right now.
Mm-hmm.
But that's hard facts, right? The shalom is required now to how do we manifest this right now?
Right.
That's why emet is complicated, because emet is you're forcing right now, let's say, in this case, the head of the opposition and other parties, the coalition keeps quoting them saying, but didn't you say 1, 2, 3? Didn't you say da, da, da? Yes, you're forcing me to look at just truth. That's not going to get us to where we want to go to right now. That's not, I won't be able to compromise on just truth because you're making me stick on this truth place, and that is not allowing me necessarily to move forward. But that's why when I say, the shalom is really the divine, is the higher level of truth, because it's all encompassing.
Mm-hmm. Right.
It's more than the superposition. I'm saying the superposition
right. Is the problem. Sorry, repeat that.
I'm saying the superposition is the problem, because in the superposition, you're deciding like, here it is right now. But then there's no room for movement anymore, right? Like, this is where it is. I need to be able to be looking at it. I need to see both options. And because of that, I need to be able to, and this goes back to the place of doubt, really, is how do I wield doubt as a sword or as a tool, where like it's not crippling, rather it's empowering.
And how does that relate to emet u'mishpat shalom?
Well, I would say that in shalom, you are getting an emet that is seemingly like, if I could be doubting myself in a certain sense, and because I'm doubting myself, I'm lowering my level of certainty and allowing others to come inside. That allows me to create a space now where I can move forward together. Right? I was saying how in Hebrew there's milchama and there's lahalchim. There's war and there's to weld together. Right? So during the process of war, right, while welding, I'm putting a huge amount of fire on it right now.
Yeah.
Right? If it's too much fire, this thing's going to snap and melt, basically. If it's not enough, I'm not going to be able to tear it apart and then weld it back together. So I required that place of doubt in a certain case, to doubt myself or to lessen myself or to remove the certainty I have to move to a place of shalom.
Yeah, I can see that in war, just thinking about it, because in war, probably, if you really think about it, the end result of the war, if you win, you need to be able to not consume, but you need to bring whatever area you've captured and the people within it you need to be able to absorb them. So you need to be able to alchim them, is like what you said, to weld them, to weld them into the same body in some sense, or you melt them away. Yeah. So I mean,
agreed. On that note, sir, Kol hakavod, way to go that we've finished all these 18 Mishnayot. Not bad. Moving on.
Pretty exciting.
Right? At this rate, we'll be done fairly quickly. Not that I'm excited to finish, but there's more things to do. After this, we can move on to Mesilat Yesharim. Who knows?
It's on my list.
So we're going to start next week with chapter 2. Anyone who would like to join is welcome to join. As always, we're happy to have you over here. And if I'm going too quickly or I'm unclear, do not hesitate to ask for clarification or slow me down, because en habayshan lamed, the shy one, if you're shy, you don't learn. On that note, I bid you all adieu. Ben,
Thank
next
you very
week.
much.
Any reason we're not doing next week?
No, next week also sounds good. Excited to start the second chapter.
Indeed, excited to start the second chapter. Have a great day, sir.
You too.